welcome, Carl.
Well, greetings, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Yes,
We're
things
just
are good.
we're just slowly figuring out this stuff as like the world begins to reopen and we emerge from our shells and start doing business again and have to figure out how all this stuff works all over again.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Lots of that.
So, in kind of this theme of I don't know, reemerging, maybe small bits of life getting back to normal again. I think for a lot of firms now, we're sort of out of the keep the clients on board, get through the craziness phase, and back into the like let's get growing again. Maybe I'm down a little on revenue, I got to make up. Maybe I just want to get growing again because I'm behind on whatever my goals were originally for the year. But I'm hearing a lot more marketing and growth oriented conversations, and so going down that road, like one of the questions I know I perennially hear, I know you get this as well, is just when you're sitting down in prospective client meetings, like what are the actual questions you like to use and ask to get to know them, build trust, get going? Like just literally, what are the questions? Like what are the Carl magic words with a prospective client that you use to get going now that we're getting to actually go out and see more prospects and start having these conversations again?
Yeah, love this conversation. So let's do like a 30 seconds of context. Like remember, one of the first places I go when this conversation comes up is upstream, right? So we're not going to cover it here because we've talked a lot about it, but how did they get there, right? Like that drives a huge piece of, it doesn't change the questions, but it will change the effectiveness.
Meaning like, were they referred to you, or did they come to you cold, or like
right. And how were they referred? What have they read? How did they get there? I think anytime you're having problems with this first meeting, the first thing to think about is upstream, right? Like don't get better at overcoming objections. Don't get better at selling. Get better at upstream first, and then you're at the first meeting. And then we have a bunch of mindset stuff we got to spend 20 seconds on because we've talked about it before. Remember, they came there of their own free will and choice. Unless you have rules somewhere in the country you live in that I'm not aware of, they came there of their own free will, right?
Right.
And they overcame a couple of things to come, like they've overcome a cultural thing around talking about money. They maybe, depending on what's been in the press lately, they've overcome like this general perception of our industry speaking broadly, and yet they're still there.
Yep.
So when you walk into that meeting, I think that the first step of these questions working is you've got to walk in feeling confident, like you know what you're doing, right? So we've covered that before. We can cover it in length, but assuming all of that, right? You sit down, and then a couple more like big principles. I think you can look at Brad Klotz's work, Derek Lawson's work. And a lot of the other work on Hal Gregerson at MIT does some amazing work around questions.
Okay.
And they all point to this idea of open-ended, being conversational rather than feeling like an interrogation. So many people feel like, here's my 17-point, intake form, fill it out. Like nobody enjoys that. So if we get all that context right, you're sitting down, you're feeling confident. The other thing I would point out is I don't feel like a question zealot. There are some question zealots in our midst who have developed specific questions and feel like they're the only ones. I think there's plenty of room for you to work out what works for you. But remember, I think that the hallmark of a good question is it's often people have never been asked it before. And when they haven't been asked a question before, often when they're first asked, it can feel a little uncomfortable, right? They didn't necessarily come in expecting that question. So when it feels uncomfortable, don't confuse that. And this is a real art to sort out like what's a good question because it feels uncomfortable, and what's maybe a question that doesn't work for you because it was just too uncomfortable. And that's something for you to sort out. But given all of that, here are some of my favorites. You can always go Bill Bacharach's stuff around why is money important to you. You know, it's sort of a classic in our industry, and Bill teaches it better than anybody.
But wait, let me just frame up so that what's important about money to you is.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I've mashed Simon Sinek's work with Bill's work, and I ask why, despite all the feedback that you're not supposed to ask why.
Okay.
Why is money important to you was always my favorite question.
Oh, I didn't even actually mean to shift it. I was just trying to remember and channel my backtrack as well. I guess that's the point. Is it what's important about money to you, or why is money important to you? Because those actually are very different questions.
Totally. Bill's the master, and I would go look at all of his material, and he uses what's important about money to you. Like that, he's the master of that question. I still love and teach smashing Simon Sinek's work around why together with Bill's work. But it needs to be done softly. It can't feel like, Michael, why is money important to you? It can't feel like an interrogation. It needs to feel soft. Like, you know, Michael, why is money important to you? Right. That's still, and then I go the same path as Bill teaches. So I'd refer you there. So that's one.
And the essence of that is because you start getting an understanding on just the lens through which someone is viewing money, right? If you say what's important about money to you, right? Some people will say usually some version of safety, security, like it makes sure that we've got our home and we're safe and we're protected. We can provide for our goods, right? And just if you get someone where money is about safety and protection and security, it's a very, very different mindset than some people are very giving and charitably inclined. Like, what's important about money to you? Well, it's my opportunity to help friends and family and the organizations that are important to me. It's like, oh, okay, well, if that's your go-to instead of safety, security, like we're going to have some different conversations. And you get entrepreneurial types, and what's important about money to you is like, well, it's my next business opportunity. It's the next thing I can build or create. Like, okay, well, we're going to have completely different conversations than my other client who said it's about giving, or my other client who said it's about safety, security. So like, I think the essence of that question is just understanding someone's frame around money.
Yep.
Because it would or should very much guide the question about where are you going in the business, or where are you going with your business with them? Like, where are you taking this client meeting?
I think that's an important framing to understand. Like what I believe we're trying to do in a first meeting is to, I believe it's a mutual discovery process. And I do think it's a well-intentioned goal to understand what the client may want and compare that with what you want and what you're able to deliver. And I think that gives you a sense of confidence. I've only got 100 seats. I'm interviewing people, like that feeling, but there's something that sits a little bit underneath goals is kind of what we're pointing at, right? Because you can't, one of the questions you're not allowed to use is, what are your goals? And there's a whole bunch of reasons around that, because nobody knows. First of all, they don't want to be asked that question. They've told me, hundreds of them send me emails saying, I don't want to meet with a financial planner because they're going to ask me what my utility bills are going to be 17 and a half years from now. So there's something that sits underneath it. And Bill refers to it as values. And that's a great framing. I also love the idea of purpose. Like, I've been working for the last couple of years on an idea of a statement of financial purpose is the first kind of thing, which we'll cover in another episode, right? So, but just keep in mind, so I think that the other well-intentioned goal of this first meeting is trust. And John Bowen used to say, I'm sure he still does, that people will judge you by the quality of the questions you ask. And I love to think of trust is not a function of the quantity of time you spend together, but a function of the quality of the experience. When you smash those two together, you sort of get like, trust will be a function of the quality of the questions you ask and the experience you give them being listened to. So, and then one last piece of framework, which I just think is so valuable, is Blair Enns. And if you're not familiar with Blair's work, it's amazing. His work on pricing, and it's ENNS, Blair Enns. Blair says the pricing decision, and this is him synthesizing other people's academic work, but the pricing decision, what's going on in a client's mind, generating trust, deciding if we want to work together, is they are saying, I've got a desired future state, and I'm going to discount you, the advisor. I'm going to discount this relationship based on my confidence that you can get me to my desired future state. So the way he says that is a desired future state discounted for uncertainty, right? And so what's interesting is that there's massive uncertainty in your ability to get me to a desired future state if you don't even know what the desired future state is. Right? So all of that's like the backdrop. And what's interesting, I just realized this, we just hired a new financial planner as a family. And let's put a button in this to spend a whole episode on like why but she's read a lot of my work, and we sort of made a deal that was like, we're firing Carl Richards as the family financial planner. We're hiring you do your thing. But one question she asked us was, she used those words. She just said, hey, I'm assuming you've probably thought about this, but if I were to ask you, what's your desired future state? Like, she said it that way, just really soft, and like, it wasn't desired future state. It was like, what's your desired future state? Like, if you had to paint a picture for me, what would that be? That's an amazing question. I was all in until I was like 10 minutes into it. And then I was like, that's my question. It was so good.
That's a version of the famous Dan Sullivan question as well, right? If this relationship works out well over the next 3 years, like, what has to have gone well or changed for you to decide that this was meaningful for you 3 years from now?
So good. Yeah. So that would be where I would have gone next, is Dan Sullivan's question, and the book, the Dan Sullivan question. Pretty easy. He wrote the book on it. The question, and he feels really strongly about this, is use the date. So if we were meeting 3 years from now we're recording this on May 21st, 2023.
Yep.
What would have to happen both personally and professionally in order for you to feel like the last 3 years were a success? Powerful, right? It gives you a time frame. It projects you future. It's a way of asking for a desired future state without using those words. But I always thought you shouldn't use desired future state words until our planner did it to us. And I was like, that was beautiful. Really well done. So that's Dan Sullivan's. Then the other question I love, and I don't really know who, it's just a mashup of what I've seen great planners do all over the world. And I love this because it's so simple. And I think Bill Bacharach's question, like we could put George Kinder's 3 questions about if you only had a month to live, or a year to live, a month to live, a day to live, or something, or you were writing your own obituary. We can put those, George, I think, on a continuum of like comfort level. You might be like George's questions, and again, like amazing, and go to George's work for it, right? And if you can get yourself there, and what I mean by that is it involves some pretty intense personal work too, right? To get yourself comfortable with those questions. George, Bill, Dan Sullivan, and then this question over here, I feel like it's sort of like a comfort level thing, is simply, I love this question because it's so simple. And I don't no small talk, like literally, like, Michael, it's so good to have you here. My favorite thing to say was, Michael, thanks for spending the time, or Michael, thanks for coming in today. It shows how committed you are to making smart decisions about money. So let's start here. What brought you in today? It's my favorite one. It's my new favorite. Like, what brought you in today? Quiet. And remember, we'll cover this in other episodes, but how to make this meeting effective, that's a different subject. Now we're just giving you questions, but one of the things you need to learn is quiet, right? Listen. And then Brian Koppelman is the master at this, his podcast, The Moment. He'll say things like, it's amazing. He'll ask one question. It'll be a 20-minute conversation, and he'll just go deeper. Tell me more. Oh, that's interesting. Why is that? Right? Like, so what brought you in today? Oh, tell me more. And that involves a comfort and a confidence level that you just need to practice. You may say, I can't do that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's just practice, right? Because you don't have a script. Like, tell me more. What about that? When did you first learn that? Right? And then the killer follow-up after a little bit of back and forth in there. This is like the best question. What brought you in today? You ask some questions, clarifying questions, and then simply to say, oh, thank you for that. How do you think I could help with that?
Mm.
So good. Like to me, and I believe Dan Sullivan, not to be confused with Dan Sullivan. So Sullivan, Solin, the greatest, the smartest sales book you'll ever read. One of those two. I believe Dan was the one that was just sort of like, stop with all the fanciness. Just ask them why they're there. Yeah. Right? So that would be my set of like 4 or 5 of my favorite questions.
Yeah, and I've been starting to experiment with the last one in particular. That has always been one of my favorite. Like, just getting every new meeting started off with what brought you in today? Like, what brings you to meet with us today? The version that I've actually been experimenting with a little bit lately that I'm finding I like a little bit more is asking, what led you, as we get started, just wondering what led you to schedule this meeting with me today?
So good.
That brings you here. And the reason I anchor it that way is I find like asking what led you to schedule this meeting today and bring you here usually gets them immediately to the trigger point.
Right. That's so
like
good.
what actually, right? You could have met with,
there was an event. Yeah.
Right. There was a thing, because just asking like what brings you to the office today. Just I'm concerned about retirement. I'm not sure we've got enough. Like they'll acknowledge some pain points. My portfolio has been volatile lately. Just a little bit. Like they'll usually acknowledge something about the pain point, but I find understanding the trigger event.
Yeah, it's good.
Is very powerful. And asking like what led you to schedule this meeting with us today and bring you in. They tend to start very directly with whatever the triggering event was. And I find just that brings even more clarity. Knowing we're coming up for retirement for a while, but like I just got the paperwork about what I'm supposed to do with my pension and realize I have no idea what to do with this paperwork. I'm like, okay, awesome. Like, so that's actually the question that's on top of your mind. And you just got the paperwork. So I'm already like starting to fill in your retirement date and a bunch of other contexts, and then can go deeper to say, like, tell me more about what you're working on. Like why is that causing you so much anxiety? Right. And like, then we get down immediately thereafter to the sort of the second stage of, but what really brought you in? Like, what's the concern? What's the anxiety? What's the pain point that we're trying to solve? But I found that kind of framing up is what led you to schedule the meeting.
Yeah.
So gets them to the, not just the pain, but the trigger.
Yeah. No,
and I usually find a lot of perspective in the trigger, right? Like you've known you were going to retire for a long time. You've known you might not have enough for a long time. Something made you do the meeting today and not 6 months ago or 12 months ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Like what made it today?
I love that. And I think this, because we're focused on the questions, I want to acknowledge that this may leave some people feeling a little unsatisfied because we can't dive into what happens next. And we're doing, I just want to acknowledge everybody listening, we're doing that on purpose. Like we can't spend the time to dive, and we've covered it in other places, and I think we'll dig in even deeper. But one thing that's really important here is to realize like that thing, that trigger is probably going to be something, right? It's not going to be some deep, most of the time, it's not going to be some deep clarifying, like, Because I realized we had unclear goals and I really wanted to come in and talk to somebody who would help me. It's going to be most likely like
I
my
really wanted a
performance
comprehensive financial plan. I realized I just don't have one.
I don't have
really
a
want it,
holistic,
all the pages.
a holistic plan, or I need we were thinking we needed a trusted advisor. Like that's not going to be what it's going to be is a thing. And it's an acute problem typically related to investment performance, if we're honest. Like often, I bet we could say 50% of the time related to investment performance. And then we got cash flow and life insurance and inheritance and, but if it's all those things. And then we have to just acknowledge here that there's a really amazing dance, because we've had other questions about this. There's an amazing dance to take them from what they really want right then. And we're okay. I'm going to use the word selling. Like I'm okay with sort of acknowledging and even selling something that they want, but then I like to think of it as righteous tricks, right? Like the art of this business is so beautiful. The art of this business is pulling the righteous trick to get them from what they want to what we all know they need, right? And we all know. So that's the delicate dance of the first or second or third meeting, is like, how do I take you there? So what happens there is you got to remember, if you ask the question, you better darn well care about the answer. So you can't be like, oh, investment performance, that's stupid. What we do here is holistic financial. What we do is we say, I can understand, wow, that's, the fact that your portfolio is down or your portfolio is not up as much as you'd hoped or whatever, I can understand why that would be a problem. In fact, that's a really important part of the work we do here. Really important, right? And then the trick becomes a whole bunch of stuff like, and before we get there, can we, and then we back up to all that context, but we'll cover that in another thing. So those are my favorite questions.
So I think we kind of, I guess, ironically, we've sort of anchored around three questions. No, not to riff on George Kinder's great three questions, but kind of one that this, like, what brought you in today, or what led you to schedule this meeting with us today? What's important about money to you? And drilling a little deeper on that, and the Dan Sullivan question. Like, if we were meeting 3 years from now in May of 2023, what would have had to happen personally and professionally for this relationship to have been a success?
Totally. I don't think there's much else that I think I don't know what the right number is. The bulk of first meetings.
Carl, I need a number.
I know you do. You're gonna have to do a little research.
Are you forgetting who you're talking to?
I know you guys will. Your team will have to go do a little research and figure.
All right, I'm gonna approximate 92%, but we'll do the follow-up.
You don't even know what I was gonna say, but yeah, I think that's right. But I think 92.7% of all financial professionals, speaking broadly, meetings would go up a factor if they used any one of those three and got comfortable and sort of locked in and practiced. None of them are comfortable. Most of us humans, especially as humans with calculators, this is the part of the business we might not be comfortable with. But you can get better at it. And the way you get better at it is practicing. And any one of those three, like the tendency is you try one, and you're like, oh, that wasn't fun. Well, yeah, it wasn't fun. Like neither is getting your golf swing filmed for the first time. Never fun, right? Like, but if any one of those three, just pick one. What was the Buddha said something like there's 80,000 paths to enlightenment. Pick one. And I love that idea. Any one of those questions I think would dramatically improve 92.7% of financial advisors meetings, just because we're not naturally good at this.
Well, awesome. I hope these are helpful questions for folks. Let us know what you think. Send something into the site and let us know, because we need to know how many of you find these questions useful to validate the 92.7% estimates that we have made. But that's right. Thank you, Carl, for sharing this.
Amen. Thanks, Michael. Oh, you know what we should mention real quick? That question, just know that we treat this here. That question came from Twitter, and I believe it was Russ Thornton. So when we ask for questions, we mean it, and yes. It makes this whole experience better for all of us. So thank you to Russ and many other people that second, sort of liked or retweeted that question on Twitter. Thanks.
So, at Michael Kitces, at Behavior Gap, you can find us on Twitter when we actually really do ask, like, what do you want us to talk about? That's where we ask. So
Amen.
Check us out there and let us know what else you want to hear.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Carl.